I'm going to try to implement zooming and panning. So I'm going to start. Shout out to this guy here. I'm going to start with this tutorial. He shared the code here. So I'm gonna paste this code on a project that I have there that I'm using to test things and see if it works. Then if it works, I'm going to translate this into C++, and then I'm gonna think about if it's necessary to do adjustments, which it probably will be. So the main thing that I want to figure out after this is how to make it so that the camera doesn't move if the click action on the panning event happens inside of something that is happening inside of the scene. And I have a rough idea of how I'm going to implement this, but yeah, we're gonna see. And before I start doing this, I'm gonna explain something from the previous stream that I had to fix that I realized after I did this, which is the arrow for the edge using so I created a cylinder primitive from inside of a cubic Bezier curve, and then I realized that I did something not wrong, but it wasn't the best the way that I was doing. So I had to fix that. I'm gonna explain there what I had to do to fix. But basically now I have the edge, and I'm not 100% sure if it's like really accurate, but I think that it seems to be working. So I'm just gonna leave it the way that it is now. So after I install the camera stuff, I'm going to create a simple graph. Probably just 2 nodes connecting to each other with the edge, and then I'm gonna have to figure out what kind of setters and getters I'm gonna have to do first to connect one node with the other from the graph component. But for now, I'm going to do the camera first. I said I was gonna do the connection first, but then I realized I can just test the edge by putting different distances there. That's what I did. So basically, the problem that I was having is that I forgot completely is that the way that I'm doing the arrow here is based on the segments of the Bezier curve. So the way that this works is that on this function I have the cubic Bezier curve formula, which does this formula here, and I'm creating segments on the curve based on the percentage that I put here, which is an interpolation between 0 and 1. So cubic Bezier curve is done from interpolations of different lines that make up a polygon, and then through the interpolations it makes up a curve path, which is the final equation we got there. So I'm using that on a loop to get the position, and the idea that I had is that for a percentage of the curve I'm going to put the arrow. So the last 2 segments, instead of being a regular cylinder, I'm just going to change the radius of both of them so that it creates an arrow, which I think is the easiest way to implement this. So this works fine. So over on the loop here, I get the position, then I get the velocity, which is the derivative of the cubic Bezier, and then I get the normalized value of the velocity, which is the tangent. And the tangent is used to calculate the plane. That's going to be the inclination of the segments that you put, the circles, because essentially what you're doing is putting a bunch of circles along the path of the curve and connecting them with quads. So you connect them through the indices later. So the indices make up the edges, and the first part is just creating sequences of cylinders on 3D, and then on the indices you're creating the connection of the 2 different cylinders, the 2 different segments that makes up the quads, which make up the curve, the thickness of the tube. So essentially you get the tangent from the velocity, and then you get the normal, which is the cross product of the tangent with the... I'm using the z vector, and so like it seems that it is working, so I'm not 100% sure. I didn't test with the other planes here, but I think you have to put, you need to get a reference axis, because it's just going to be like the parallel or perpendicular vector from the tangent, the normal, and the binormal is the perpendicular of the normal. So the collection of the normal and the binormal creates the plane that you make the circles. So here, the first part you have to do is that I have to divide the segments based on the length of the curve, which I was using this formula here. So I was doing based on the arrow size. So I was putting the percentage on the arrow size. And it's basically the formula is just subtracting 1 from the arrow percentage. And then you multiply by I divided by curve segments. So if you don't have the arrow, it's just going to be I divided by curve segments, because each section has to be based on the percentage from 0 to 1. And because it's rotating from, going from 0 to the curve segments, when you do this calculation here, you're just breaking down the whole path up to 1 for each cylinder based on the amount of segments you want to put here. But when you have the arrow, then obviously you need an arbitrary range that's going to be the relative to the arrow. So the issue with doing this, so after you do the loop here, I put another condition, but basically these are the 2 circles that are going to make up the arrow. And it just goes from the last point that was drawn here based on these values. Because when you do this formula here, the last point is not going to be 1 that you use on here. Like this is the value of t, which is the value of the interpolation that makes up the path along the curve. So if you use this formula, then the last value here is going to be 1, which is the final point. When t equals 1 is the final point for the range that you put here, which is between the start point and the end point. But if you use this formula, then it's just going to be the end point here is going to be from whatever you want the arrow size should be. So the arrow is going to be determined by that final position there, which I'm getting from here, which is the final position of this, and then the final position of the curve, which will be the value of 1. But the issue with this that I realized later is that depending on the size of the curve, the difference between the start and end point, the arrow is going to change the size a lot, because the bigger the curve, the more, even though the segments is the same, the percentage of the segments is the same, because the distance is greater, it makes the arrow a lot thinner. This is a very big problem, I think. So the solution that I found to this is pretty simple, and it seems to be working so far, but I'm not 100% sure if it's 100% accurate, but it's working. So what I did is I just got the start and end velocities. The velocity is just the derivative of the cubic Bezier curve. And the reason why I thought about the velocity is because of the videos that I watched there, but it's basically, in my mind, as far as I think right now, is that the velocity, the integration of the velocity is going to give you the curve length. But this is the part that I'm not 100% sure, because the more accurate, the one that is 100% sure is that if you get a bunch of different points along the curve, then you get the distance between each point, each 2 points. So it would be basically getting the distance between 2 different segments, which is just doing the triangle math between them. So you do all size x to the power of 2 plus y to the power of 2 plus z to the power of 2, and then you take the square root of that. That's the distance between the 2 different segments, and you sum those distances along the path. The overall value is going to be the curve length, obviously, because you're just putting segments together. So when you have an infinite amount of points, which is an integral, so going from the start point to the end point of the curve, then you get the overall curve length. So the curve length would be the integral of the distances between 2 different points from the start of the curve to the end of the curve. So in my mind, that's the same thing as saying that because that integral is just going to be basically replacing the value of the curve on the beginning and on the end, which is what I'm doing here. So when t equals 0, that's the start velocity, and when t equals 1, that's the end velocity. So you get the final velocity and the end velocity, and then you get the distance between the 2. And that's going to be the final curve length. So Yeah, basically the main difference is instead of, because if you think about it, if you get the distance from the position of the end and the beginning, is not going to give you the curve length because it's just going to be an arrow. So it's not going to take into consideration the path. But I think, and this is the part I'm not 100% sure, that if you get to the magnitude of the velocity, which is what I'm doing here, then is a more accurate representation, because the velocity is the variation of the rate of change of the position, which is a more accurate representation of the length, I think. So based on this curve length here, I'm getting the arrow percentage. So based on the arrow size that I'm putting there, which right now is 10. So this is the size, like this size is going to be fixed regardless of how long the curve is, because you get the percentage based on the overall length. So the arrow size is always the same. And what you use to create the segments is the arrow percentage. So based on this, regardless of how long or short the path is, the size of the arrow is always going to be the same, because it's determined by this value here, which is in relationship to the overall curve length. So this seems to be working for now. The other thing that I did was to reverse so when you generate the indices here, I got this from 3JS, but I reversed the faces here because of the winding order. So based on the way that I'm doing, this connection here is gonna make it so that the front of the quads are facing outside of the geometry. And I did this for the other part that I did here, which is the cap start, which means whether or not you're gonna close the beginning of the curve with a cylinder. Which I'm basically doing the same thing, just get the point on the start and then just generate another circle based on the radius. And then here I'm creating this, which is another thing that I did wrong in the beginning, because here you have to put this condition here, which means that it's only gonna go to because you're putting 3 values at each iteration, it has to go up until 3 values less from the overall length of the points, which is the amount of points you have there. It's basically just connecting the indices on the other way around. Like you're getting an anchor point, which is the beginning of the curve, the beginning position of the curve. Then you are connecting based on a triangle that's it's going to be based on the points you generated here for the circle. At the center is always the anchor point, and the other should rotate based on the rotation of the curve. So just center plus I, and then center plus y plus 2, and you generate on this order, because this scene should be the way that it works there. If you want, the face should be outside of the curve, which obviously is what makes most sense. So it could be wrong, I'm not 100% sure, but based on, I just did 2 simple tasks. Just put 2 different values of one I put from 0 to 100, the other one from 0 to 1000. So it's a very big difference, and it seems that the arrow is roughly the same. So I'm just gonna leave it like this. But what I'm gonna do now is just try to... I don't think I'm gonna show the other path there because it's not the focus today. So I'm just gonna open that project and show the curve. Then I'm gonna change the camera a little bit, then remove the curve from the thing, put the sphere on the range of the camera, then see if I can visualize the sphere. Then I'm gonna create a script for the camera, paste this stuff there and see if it works. If it works, then I create another class on the modules. So basically that's how it looks right now, and you can see that you have here. The way that I saw whether or not it was the right side, I just removed the curve and then I rotated around the cylinder to see what kind of side was facing, what was the front of the cylinder. And I do believe right now that Godot by default doesn't render the back of the geometry based on the stats that it did. So right now it seems that it is working. and the other one was also off, but now is working as well because I just changed the order of that's the faces are being rendered based on the indices. It is kind of weird to move here, which I'm not 100% sure if it's like because I did something wrong or if it's just because of Godot is usually like this, or depending which direction you zoom in and out, is a lot harder to get closer to the geometry. So I'm gonna remove this now. I'm just gonna focus on the sphere on the camera. I don't understand why they don't have, to be honest, a camera that is that already comes with panning and zooming because like I understand that for each project is gonna be different what you want to do, but doesn't make a lot of sense to me because there could be like just standard classes for like one for zooming and panning, for example, and the other for first person or like stuff like that. I don't understand why they don't do this. Why they don't have? Maybe they do have. So I'm gonna search there. I'm gonna close all this stuff as well. And this was the warning that I was getting there because I wasn't doing these indices correctly here. I was putting the condition the wrong way. Also in the first one, I thought I should put the beginning point here, but then I realized that I already have the beginning point because of the points are generated here, basically. So, and also, yeah, I think it doesn't matter anyway because of this, because the generate circle makes the thing based on the point already. So it already includes the anchor point that you create all the triangles from. It's basically here. So we don't need to add the point again to rotate. I was expecting though for the point to be at the center of the thing. It's kind of interesting that it doesn't. So like the tangent is on the surface of the curve, and the tube is created from that point, based on the normal and binormal. So it generates the circle, which in my mind was different. I was thinking more about that they would be on the center of the circle, the points you put along the curve based on the equations, but yeah. The other thing that I was thinking about doing is just a cap end to put, which is would be basically the same as this one, just changing from 0 to 1. I might do that later, but I'm kind of lazy now, so. Yeah, so now it's showing there, but it doesn't have anything, obviously. So I'm just gonna attach script here. It might be a different version, so that's why it might fail. The main thing that I'm interested on is the functions used, which I wrote down here as well. I think if it's too complicated, it's probably easier to just build from the thing already, from C++. I just wanna see the... So this is something that I've seen on a couple of tutorials that I didn't watch a bunch of them, but probably like 5 or 7 or something like that. And it seems that people usually put on the physics process, like the functions, which means that they're calling each iteration. I'm not really sure if that's necessary or not. So I think that the way that I'm gonna do it, so this input function here on GDScript is, if I remember correctly, or I don't think I tested this on anything yet, but I'm pretty sure that this is gonna be equivalent to GUI input function on the code, C++ code. So I think you can declare a GUI input function and then just do the movement based on whatever, based on the inputs. But for the penning, it's probably necessary to put the function on the process. But I think for zooming, probably not. Can probably put only here, because you only want the function to be called if there is a zoom event. The other thing is that he changed some values of the project settings. Not sure if that's necessary or not. I think it might be because there are probably default events. So I'm going to study this function here. The issue is that based on the way that events work there on C++ code, which you already have a surface level understanding, it's not going to be very easy to figure out. Maybe if I put breakpoints, what are the standard events that they put there? So the thing that I'm thinking about doing is going over other classes, going over based on the editor classes. I think that's probably better to see how do they capture events on their C++ functions. Then based on that, I just copy. So I think that's probably a better idea. I have to see how to find the class that is responsible, which I think is a plugin. So it might be kind of annoying. So I'm not really sure if it's worth it. But the class that's responsible for this camera here that they already have. So if I can find this class, and if it is not on GDScript or something like that, if it's just C++, then obviously it's going to be a lot easier to copy. The main thing that I want to change from this is that I think it makes more sense to do penning with the right or with the left mouse button instead of doing it with the wheel, the press of the wheel. But I understand why they do like this here. They also do like this on Blender. And the reason why is because they want to make it the left mouse button should be the selection, which makes more sense for an editing tool. But I think for applications, it makes more sense to have the left as the penning. So what I'm gonna do is just I think I'm gonna do it directly on C++ because I don't want to fix these errors here, these values. I think it doesn't make a lot of sense. So what I'm gonna do is just create a C++ class. Then I'm gonna copy these functions here that they have. Because the main thing that I think is, I already know based on other projects how to do things. Basically for the penning, you're gonna have the mouse up, the mouse move, and the mouse down. The mouse up and the mouse down set flag variables. Then the variation between frameworks is gonna be the delta, like how do you get the difference between the mouse positions. And on the mouse move, you're just gonna do the spread. So the difference between the previous one and the current one. And then the delta, you just translate the camera position based on the delta. So the most annoying things based on the previous experience that I had is just figuring out how to translate the mouse position, which is usually on screen coordinates, to world coordinates, because that involves unprojecting the position, which means that it's just gonna get the XY from the screen, and it's gonna translate that to world coordinates. So I think it's unprojecting. It's probably just unprojecting. So you basically do the reverse process. No, so there's two things. One is the getting the perspective again, which is the z value, and it's not really the z value. It's like because the z value doesn't matter. It's going to be based on the zoom. No, for the panning also doesn't matter because usually you're just you don't want the camera to go in and out as you pan. So it's just a Z, X and Y movement. But for the X and Y, it doesn't matter because the Z changes the X, Y as well. So you're basically like, to go from world coordinates to screen coordinates, to get this perspective, 3D perspective, you're just gonna divide by the Z coordinates. So it's basically multiplying by the perspective projection matrix, which takes it does a calculation based on the field of view, which is based on the triangle. So it's basically on the two. So you have the focal point, and then you have the near plane, which is a rectangle, and then you have the far plane, which is another rectangle, which creates the perspective. So to create the field of view impacts, because it's a triangle math, is going to determine how the focal length, I think, and then the focal length is directly affects the Z fighting, I think, which is as the Z positions get closer to the far plane, because of the way that these calculations work, there can be some problems there, if I remember correctly. I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember that it is impacted. So there's both the perspective, which is the Z, dividing by Z, and this focal length, which is determined by the field of view. So those main two things you have to do to unproject. So you're just basically doing the inverse operation that you would do from world coordinates to screen coordinates. But it can be very annoying to deal with the details of that. So they're getting the velocity based on this function. Everything that has an underscore, I assume that the name is going to be the same as plus plus. It's just going to be without the underscore. I think that's usually how they do it. There's clamp. So this is another thing that I learned from Scratch Pixel, but I don't think it doesn't matter that much. It's just like a thing about words. But usually when people say zoom, they actually mean dolling. And the difference is dolling is changing the position of the camera on 3D coordinates, and zooming would be changing the focal length, which would be to increase the resolution of things. So it does change the two operations because the resolution is going to impact like the color and everything else on the visualization. Because it basically is like, it's kind of like zooming in and out of a picture. You can lose or gain resolution depending on the situation, I think, if you change the focal length. But if you dolly, then the resolution is always the same. The only thing that is changing is that the relative position of the camera on the visualization. But usually people want dolling, and I think that's what's happening here. They are just getting the new zoom, and then they are translating the camera by Z. And the thing here, I don't think this one, based on what I'm looking here, it does the zoom based on the coordinate of the mouse, which is the hard part to do. Which in the previous one that I did, I just did a triangle math, so like you basically get X and Y, and then you get the hypotenuse. I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly in English, but You get the distance basically from the mouse to the center of the visualization, or from the position of the camera. So get the distance from the position of the mouse to the position of the camera. With the position of the mouse, that should be in world coordinates. And then you just shift, you just translate the camera by the position of the mouse, and then you add the zoom, I think. So I'm mainly looking for the, yeah, I'm gonna do that. No, I'm just gonna do it straight on C++, because I think it's gonna be like better than trying to figure out there on the what variables are not working on the GDScript thing. Let's check and just see. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT if there are more versions of the, like if there are more standard or cameras on the code on C++. I think it's just Camera3D then. Last field of view, blah blah blah, camera. So what I'm gonna do is create a class. I have to think about what name, but probably the name is gonna be standard camera or something like that. So I'm just gonna put here, I think I'm just gonna do standard camera. Standard camera H, standard camera CVP. So this is a folder that has a module that I'm building, and that's how you add new classes on Godot. Let's put here. Oh, actually, it's gonna be standard camera 3D. Because maybe I'm gonna do stuff on 2D, so it's gonna be the same. It's gonna be like same stuff, but on 2D. So seeing 3D camera, I'm just gonna put class here to forward declare. So in C++, it's better to do this where you just declare like this, the file. But I think like if I'm inheriting from previous classes that I did, you can't really do this. This is called forward declaring. So you specify the name of the class here just so the compiler doesn't throw warnings. And then you include the class on the C++ file. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna decrease the chances that there are conflicts between multiple includes on different C++ files. Because each C++ file is a translation unit. So the combination of the C++ file and the header that it depends on is called the translation unit. And putting these conditions here don't prevent C++ from including the file multiple times, the same file multiple times, which will cause a conflict on the definition of things. So this usually prevents C++ from including the same header on the same translation unit, but it doesn't prevent on different translation units. So if you include here, for example, if I include the camera here, then increases the chances of having problems when you include this file on multiple different C++ files. But I think for when you're doing, when you're inheriting from the class, then it doesn't allow you to. I'm not sure why, but it seems that this is how it works. It doesn't allow you to for declare. I think it's probably because the compiler needs more information to resolve things. Sing 3D, Camera 3D. Yeah, so here what you have to do is just call GD class, I think, which is a macro. I don't remember if I put like this. I do. So it's a macro you use to register the class on the ClassDB class from Godot, which is a class that they use to keep track of all the types that are used. And it's going to be the bridge between C++ code and the editor, and also GD script. So you put this class, which is going to add extra functionality to this class here, which is going to make it so that whenever you use memnew, which is another macro to allocate memory for the class on a memory pool that they use, it's going to call some function from ClassDB that is going to put this type on the global object that Godot uses to keep track of all the types. And I think you need to have a constructor with no arguments to initialize the class. So I assume that a camera is going to be a node 3D. So I'm not really sure if Camera 3D has. So how does this work? It might be a lot more difficult than I'm thinking. Because the control nodes are the ones that implement the GUI inputs functionality. So if events are done based on signal, it's going to be kind of annoying. But then I think that the way you implement is just based on the notification. That's probably how I have to do it. So notification is a function that all the nodes have, underscore notification, which is used. I did a string to explain this some time ago, but it's a function that they use to allow you to add extra functionality to the class hierarchy. So whenever you create a class and you want to modify the behavior of the class, you just implement this function here. And for the whole class inheritance chain that the class has, it's going to call these notification functions for each one, depending on the order you pass there. So usually, by default, I think it calls from the base class first. So node 3D, for example, and node implements this notification function, which has some standard functionality, which is going to make the node emit some signal, I think. For example, or call this notification function that it's going to be a recursive function that for each class that inherits from that function, if the class implements the notification, is going to call this function for that class. And then here you can put the standard, the switch statement determines the parts of the cycle where the class is at. And then it allows you to add extra functionality. So this is basically the equivalent of the events from GDScript here. So I think that's probably how you implement, because the difference is that on control nodes, which are GUI elements, you have another function that works in a similar way to the notification, but it's called GUI input. And GUI input allows you to, but this is the problem. I think that there needs to be something like this for this class here, because you're going to need the event. So GUI input receives as an argument a reference to an event. So I'm going to have to figure this out. Because if it works on GDScript, it should work here, but then it might be problematic because there's another way to create other classes for Godot, which is using GD extensions. which you're working more in a composition way because you're just changing the member variable of the object class with another class that, and this is like the approach that GDScript uses. So it creates an interface between some outside, it's like basically an API between the object class and whatever functionality you want outside through this class that called object, no, it's called GD extension something, which is different than doing what I'm doing now, which is just inheriting from the class, because this is like creating a new class by inheritance, and using GDScript is changing the behavior of the class through composition by adding extra functionality through the class that works as an API, which is the GD extension class. It's basically this function here. So GUI inputs can implement this function, and this would be the events that you receive. But I think only control nodes have this GUI input function. So because Camera3D is a node 3D, I don't think it has this function. So what I have to clarify is how to implement a function that receives an event. But I think here they are not doing based on events. They're just doing based on the process, which is related to the notification. Oh no, they have these inputs here. So maybe Node 3D does have some input function. Let me finish creating this class here and registering to see if everything works. Then I'm going to... So after you do this, you put the class here, you have to put on these files here, register type, which are the files that are going to initialize the module. Standards, Camera3D. And this macro here should register the class on the class DB thing. This exposes the thing. So what I'm going to do is just close the stuff, compile and see if there's any problems. And after that, I'm going to study the Node 3D and Camera3D classes to see what functions can I implement. So I'll be right back. I'm gonna put timer here. So I'm gonna try to put it 1.5 hours. Or maybe just 1 hour. I'll put 1 hour, then take a break. And then go for another 1.5 hours, I think. So I'm gonna delete the script. It's Camera3D. I can't do that. I'm gonna delete the thing and see if the warnings go away. Camera3D. Is this an issue? Maybe I just but if I delete here, there are gonna be other errors. So I'm just trying to see, because I can delete the script because I'm gonna copy this stuff on the thing there. So whatever. Hey, what's up? Oh, so I think there are no errors. So yeah, what I was saying. Oh, so I think from this point there you don't need to do anything else. You just register. So obviously then I'm gonna add everything. This should be no. So we're just gonna include. I'm just adding a vault to the. So the include, I'm just assuming that the root is the root of the folder, the modules folder. So it's on this level here because of the way that you add the files with scones. So you have to put this file here and then you put this thing here. So based on the path you put here to add the C++ files, it allows you to put the includes based on the relative path you have here. So you can assume that the folder of the module is the root folder, let's say, and do the includes from that path. Or you can assume that the root folder of Godot is the root folder. And I think that it also works if you do the import from that path as well. But I think it's easier to just put the relative path from the module. So now let me see. So basically I have to figure out whether or not Node 3D has an input event or Node has. Can be on object, sure. So how does that work? Alright, so it does have the function here. So this is the function that they are using there. So assume what I have to do is just implement this. I'm not sure if it needs to do override. That's the thing. Maybe this has to be protected as well because the notification is protected. So I do remember that. I think this is slightly different for the. So there's both bind methods. So bind methods allow you to. It's a function that they usually or they always use to add the methods of the class, to register the methods of the class on the on the class DB class. And they use another macro for that, and they usually put this function inside of the protected of the class. So I'm just gonna put here, and also notification is usually on the protected as well. Just declare like this. Here puts public or private. I'm gonna put public. So there is also this function that I've seen on tutorials as well, unhandled input, unhandled input. Let's do this. So I think that the main thing that I have to do, maybe we don't even need the other GDScript because I already know how to implement. I just figure out it's better GDS. The GDScript's better to get the functions for the mouse there that they use, but I have to figure out how to, from this input here, to specify what kind of thing it is. I think on the line something, I forgot the name. I can look based on the editor stuff. This is what I was gonna do before. I think it's line GUI or something like that. So let me think about what should I do. Me define the notification. So in order to be able to use this, or for the class to call this function with the notification process as an argument, you have to, on the constructor of the class, you need to call set process, which is a function I think from the object class, and then you put true, and that's gonna tell Godot or the class to call its notification function whenever it is on the notification process part of the cycle. But by default, it doesn't call this. It calls for other events, so like the ready, for example. The ready happens, well, notification ready, I think, happens when the node is ready. So in the beginning of the, before it starts the visualization, let's say. But this should here run every frame. So I think that's why they are off by default. And I think that this is the one that you use there. So I think mainly, I'm not really sure if I need this one. And that's the thing. So the way that they do it there, I think is based on every frame they update the values. But I think you can do it just based on the input that you receive. So I'm probably gonna have two different functions, zooming and panning. We'll see if the camera has anything like that. So I'm gonna remove this. This is to handle input events that have been marked as handled by other nodes higher up in the scene hierarchy. Functions is called when an input event, such as key press, mouse movement, or touch event, is directed towards the node and all its children. For a parent node or another node in the scene has already processed the input event and marked it as handled, the event will not propagate to this node. Yeah, so I think that's the one that I want. So this should solve the part that I thought it would be kind of hard, which is that, like for 3GS, there I have to spend a bunch of time thinking about, not a bunch of time, but it was kind of annoying for the nuances. Like when if you want to implement drag, so you're able to move nodes on the visualization, and you want to implement panning, then obviously when the mouse click happened inside of the thing that you want to drag, you have to deactivate the panning from the camera. Otherwise, it fucks up everything. And also for GUI elements. So the way that I was thinking about doing this is that you just get the root of the scene that the camera is at, then you get all the childrens from the root, and then you loop over them and check to see if the event happened on any of the elements that are part of the scene. But because of this, I think it's a lot simpler. So all you have to do is whenever you want to set an event, you just put input event set handled, and then automatically it's not gonna do anything from the Camera3D because it's not gonna propagate. But I'm not really sure if that's gonna work because of the hierarchy of the scene, of the tree. But it probably works, I think. So I'm gonna copy I'm gonna do this thing, two functions here first. It's gonna be pan. I was gonna check to see if this function exists on the camera, but probably doesn't. No. So now the question is, what do I pass here? I think this part is the one that I should copy there. It's probably not gonna be like this, so I'm probably gonna do mouse move and stuff like that. So I think it's probably better to, yeah, before I do this shoe here, so zoom is probably gonna be one function, but this is probably gonna be like mouse up, then mouse down, mouse move, then mouse up I set a flag variable to true, and here I set the other one such false, and then mouse move I got the spread. So I should put the questions that I have. I think those are the two main ones. So once I figure this true out, it should be easy. So for this first question, So I'm gonna delete this stuff. I'm gonna figure out how to basically based on the main way that they handle events. Here they're gonna do some ref, and then they're gonna specify inside of the ref here some class like mouse events or something like that. And then mouse, then they do equals to this. Then they instantiate to see if it works, something like this. And they do this throughout the function to check what type of event it was. And then inside of each type of event, they figure out what to do. Oh, actually, this one is the one that I. So I do remember. Now let me think about how to figure this out. So on the editor node, but there's both the editor node and the actual events. So Godot Windows. So main start. It was on OS run. Process events. So I think from I think I'm gonna have to go over with the debugger to remember. Well, it's probably this one. So remember that this function is called. It might be either one of these other two. So I think this one is related to the window. This one is the one that is gonna translate the input from the actual window that is created by Windows. In my case here, to the input class that they have there. But it's the other function that is gonna allow me to figure out what kind of event it was. So this is what I was saying basically. But I think it's better to look from the editor node point of view, because it's gonna be closer to what I wanna do. So yeah, but I'm gonna put. So they usually check to see if it's valid. I'm just gonna copy this standard stuff here, then I'm gonna look for the editor ones. Just gonna put the same condition that they put. Hmm. Let me just copy everything here. The thing is, I don't think this logic is for when you want to do stuff. Is more, it's probably the logic that they use to translate the event that happened from the window to in the correct data structure that the other classes are gonna use. So like this is before it's preparing the flag variables and stuff like that, so that the other classes have access to the correct stuff. But I'm just gonna copy here because I wanna close these files so I can look into the other stuff. I'm gonna copy this stuff here because I wanna look into these functions. This is the final function that it gets called there. This is the function that is actually gonna handle the inputs, and this is gonna call some function. If the input happen on the control node, it's gonna call function, the GUI input function, I think, from the control node on this function here. And I think that based on the is a member variable of the class because it's based on what operational system you're using, probably. Because this class is outside of the operational system. So the display server is the class that is an abstract class that derived classes are gonna inherit from based on which kind of operational system you're using. And they're the ones that are gonna have the functionality to create the action window. And those classes use, so they capture the events from the window and then they pass the events through this input class, which is outside of that class. So I think that when Godot is setting everything up, is going to set up this the function that is going to run here because it's probably dependent on which kind of operational system you're using. So there's going to be different functions. So it's just void pointer. So it's basically a function pointer. It's not a void pointer. It's a pointer of this type. So it's a function pointer that returns void, I think, and receives the ref inputs as an argument. So I'm gonna look into I think I copied everything. So I'm gonna look into the nodes, editor nodes, examples. So I think it's probably easiest thing to do is just ask ChatGPT if it knows. It's editor spatial gizmo. Yeah, so that class should have a camera on its own, and the camera is gonna use the. So I couldn't find, so it's probably not the correct class. I'm gonna look for Gizmo on the editor file. I think it's a plugin. That's a thing. So it might be very annoying to figure out. Let's see. So I do remember I was gonna add the plugins at the end here. So one option is to go over with the debugger. Maybe it's this classes here, but I think this is just for the inspector thing there. Texture, blah blah blah. So this is the main loop I think that is gonna initialize everything, all the plugins. The problem is that there's a bunch of them. It's probably this one actually. It's both, probably both. So this is kind of the issue. So if I could just find the class without having to go over, it would be a lot better. I mainly want to look into the implementation of the editor because then it's going to be a lot easier to figure out how did they do everything. You just can copy every function and just like change the structure basically. If I have to figure out on my own there, then it's going to be more annoying to figure out the correct way to parse the inputs on the main function. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be that hard, but it's just more annoying. Maybe it's this thing here, canvas item editor plugin. Editor viewports. I'll try perplexity. Camera3D editor plugin. So they're probably changed. Hmm. As constructor. So this is probably this class now, I think. Add anchor. I'm gonna put this there and just comment it out in case I wanna. I'm probably gonna add this at some point, I think. It's probably the function that is used to handle shortcut inputs, shortcut events. So I'm trying to find the function that they use to handle the inputs for the camera. But this class is probably the one that manages everything, and this class has the camera, so I might be on this class, and then this class changes the state of the camera through the events here. Because the camera doesn't seem that it has anything here, just the constructor. So the you probably use should be this camera editor, but then they changed, and now they're using this camera 3D editor. It doesn't look like it has anything here. Impressed. So there's a control. So maybe this is another thing that is not the camera itself. But I think that this class is probably the one that's, so Node 3D editor. It's probably the one that manages the camera. So this one has an input. 3D editor viewports. It's only active during instant transforms to capture and wrap mouse events outside the control. So how do I change the... Interesting. I'll assume that somewhere here there is a way to change the mode here. Probably this thing here. So this is gonna handle zoom probably. And this is gonna handle right click. So all I have to do is switch. So copy this function and then switch the stuff there. The problem is gonna be, but I think that we just test, just see if it works. This, let's see what this gizmo. The difference is just that instead of updating the value of this gizmo, which is probably the class that they use to store the state of whatever is happening on the scene, I'm just gonna change the values of the camera there. So I just remove this stuff related to gizmo, because they probably have stuff related to the camera as well. I'm pretty sure that this is the class, no, that 3D viewport. So the functions there as well. So this functions here. And nav pan, nav zoom, nav orbit. I'm gonna write down as well. So this is probably the one that performs the panning. So I assume that wheel down and wheel up is to calculate the rotation. So it's gonna be zoom in and out. The middle is when you press the middle button, and that allows you to pan. Or no, so if you press shift and then the middle, then you pan. Just pressing the middle rotates. I guess I can put that as well. That's sounds nice. Because the way that I was doing before on the front end is I was putting a selection box. Because it was the easiest way that I found to make it work. To switch from rotating and panning. But I think it's probably better. So the way that I'm thinking about doing is just the left mouse click allows you to pan. The wheel allows you to zoom in and out, and then pressing the wheel and changing allows you to rotate. I think that's what I'm gonna do. This might be annoying though, because I need to figure this out here. Understand how these values work and then how to translate this to my stuff there. So plane is probably the plane of the visualization there. I wonder if I should do the same thing that they are doing here though. Just copy everything. That might make more sense. Because then basically I'm getting automatically everything that they do here. Just the only thing that would change is the what thing happens after which event. So just change the switch statements and then yeah, this might be like the best thing to do. The problem, so and maybe I do that and then I just remove everything related to the settings on the editor. I'll be right back. It's probably not best copy everything because I think it's just gonna be one of those things that's he's gonna end up taking a lot more work because there's a bunch of stuff related to the editor states, I think. What I'm gonna do is copy just the. I'm gonna delete the events that I copied there from the normal things because I think that this is better. I'm just getting those in case I couldn't find the editor ones. So I copy the type of events and then the switch control flow to determine what kind of event it is, and then I just figure out from here what are the functions that are specifically designed, let's say, to do the panning and zooming. I think it's basically just gonna be the wheel mainly. At the wheel plus shift. So this is probably the stuff from, this is gonna be the thing that does the panning. So nav mode. Is alt press, is shift press. Hmm. I'm not sure though, because it shouldn't be, it should be an orbit, I think. No, I think the mode is span, so it should be this nav scheme here. So I think it's falling to this condition here. Just checking to see. Yeah, but you don't need to press the alt key. That's the thing. So if press alt doesn't do anything. It's just the shift. Oh, it does change. Yeah, but it's just the shift that is necessary. So it should be something that just checks for the shift and not the. So maybe it's the L's here. Original wall distance show. Mouse position. I think this is the functionality probably. There's probably this function here. Checks to see if the shift is done. Passing this. Or it's changing the. I'm not sure though if it is this one. Yeah, this seems way more complicated than it should be for my case there. So I'm not sure if it's a good idea to copy this. It's probably better to just copy the control flow and then figure out implement my own thing there. The main thing to figure out is just the functions to get the positions and stuff like that. So this should be the main functions used. Think about this. So this one is used to check the shift thrust. Yeah, so like I said, I'm gonna focus on the simplest ones first, then for the last one I focus on the one with the shift, when you press the wheel and the shift. So for my case, it's gonna be the other. So when you press the shift and the wheel at the same time, then it rotates. When you, so it's better to focus on one by one. Let's just try to translate local basis. So I think, yeah, so this is performing the penning. I don't understand though, like how is it possible? Because it seems that it's not changing anything here besides the cursor. So it's creating this, changing the state, and then using this to change the camera position, the cursor position. But like they probably do the visualization on the based on the cursor, but Hmm. So in my case, I think what I can do is just, instead of creating this, I just transform from the camera. So obviously, what I'm gonna do is just copy the function. I'm gonna copy this function. Let me clarify the steps here. So I don't get confused. So the main thing to do first, so I'm gonna delete the other stuff that I have there. Uh, Before I do that, the last thing that I'm curious about is the free or accept event. Draw. This is the thing though, but it should be the same, I think. The difference is that the class there is a control node. But I'm gonna try to do the same. So I just copy the types of events here, and then I just call the functions directly. So basically the event and the switch should be enough to determine. The main difference is going to be what happens when you have this shift there. And what functionality I put at which place. So let me copy. Close this. So I'm gonna put the conditions here as well. So this is gonna be the main difference, I think, from the way that I'm implementing. So on these parts here, I'm going to call the functions that I'm gonna put on the class. Let me remove everything. Whatever. Also, the left is used to rotate, or the right click is used to rotate. Let me. So I'm gonna do left here. I think this is basically all mouse events. Let me do shift and then it doesn't do anything. So alt, it doesn't do anything. The other one. So the middle also rotates. So let me. So I'm gonna put middle after this. And that's the thing, I'm not really sure if the middle is should be representing like pressing the middle button. I think it probably is. And then see, this is the only thing that I'm gonna change here. Let's put left here. So I think I'm gonna do penning first, because penning is the hardest. So penning should be, maybe I should implement zoom first. So let me implement zoom first, because it's this. So. It's probably gonna be this one. I'm just gonna remove this. Yeah, this is annoying. So maybe it doesn't make sense to do it based on this because it's gonna be different. So I need to figure out the, because they're using this cursor here to change the visualization. So I need to figure out how, because basically it's gonna be the same thing. I'm just gonna replace these functions with. So instead of doing this, I'm just gonna change the values. I have to figure out what this value is and then how to change it. The equivalent on the camera. And this is the problem. So I think that this is the distance, because this is the thing, is like I think I have to. It's probably the distance is probably the distance from the mouse to the camera. The camera get near, get far. Hmm. So this would be like this. The problem is that I don't know how this is gonna be used like later. That's the issue. So if the distance time scale is this is gonna be 4 by default. I'm just gonna put here for now like this to have as a reference to the other. Like the easiest thing is to copy, but I think it's not worth it. So because it's gonna be different, so I have to figure out. It's basically keeping the value in the range between this one and this one. This value. So assume what's happening is that it's gonna use this value here to shift the visualization. Yeah, so what I have to do is figure out how to translate the camera, which I think I can get from the GD script. So based on the distance here, I can but this is the thing that is kind of weird. There's the max Garnier times 4. Yeah, I think it doesn't happen here, like the movements. So you need to get the distance and you need to shift the camera by the distance. Yeah, I think that's probably... So this is probably the Z direction, I think. Just kind of annoying. So probably the zoom and the panning is gonna happen on the other functions that I was looking at. You know, the end there. So this one just prepares the state, I think. I think it's weird because it uses another thing, true. So let me think about. I guess the easiest thing to do is just to copy the variable instead of my thing there. So I'm gonna try to do that first, then I'll think about. So after I simplify everything, you just copy. I think it's after this actually. I switch nav once. Hmm. Yeah, this is a problem actually. Because the thing is, he's using a different value Like it's using these events, but maybe I can test to see if I can call the same functions based on the thing there and do everything on the same function. It's basically gonna be the same thing. So I think I'm just gonna implement the way that I was thinking about, because it's gonna be annoying as well, actually. Figure out how they use this thing there. So let me think. So I guess the only thing that I need is this mouse thing. Yeah, so I need to figure out, because the problem is like, how do I break down this into? I think for the wheel is easier. I just do the same thing that they're doing here and just change this so that here I translate the camera. So, or I zoom the camera. So I have to get the relative position, I think, of the mouse. I'm gonna do it different than the way that they do here. So the value here is gonna be for the Z. So this is gonna be basically the value of Z. I don't understand like what what they do here, what they did here. So I'm not really sure now because like this is the problem is that in the beginning is gonna be 4, the cursor distance, but then obviously it's gonna change. So but I think it's probably the camera. Yeah, but I don't think it's the camera Z. I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna delete this stuff here, to be honest. I'm gonna delete this stuff. Maybe the multiplier, not. So the only thing that matters is the scale here, and then I multiply by the Z. I multiply the camera Z by the scale, and I get the position. So I think I have to see if I can get the relative mouse. Yeah, so I put here the relative mouse position, and then I pass through the functions. That's probably better. So the problem is how do I figure out how to do the mouse up and mouse down? So I have the left. It's gonna be based on the event, I think. I was using the cursor distance here. This is very confusing, man. So let me see if I can. I think to get the vector is vector 2. So if I have this shoe, I think the only thing I have to do is just change the function here. Let me do the zoom first, then I'll think about the. So I'm gonna change this. The biggest thing is that I'm not 100% sure if this is gonna be like in the coordinates, the world coordinates, and I can use this to calculate the distance. So I'm just gonna remove this stuff from here. Multiplier is there. Wonder if if I leave this thing here. I think I'm gonna leave this clang, and then I'm just gonna. So like, what is the distance? So let me think. Problem is the vector 2. So the question is how to get the camera position. Just trust this. It's gonna be a float. Well, let me think about this. Yeah, so it's gonna be one minus the other. Because I want the vector, not the magnitude. Yeah, then you normalize, so yeah, so it's the position minus the camera thing. Transform with origin and move direction. If I wanna put the minimum and maximum there, I think I'm just gonna put a scale. It's just simpler. I'm just gonna then I change the value if I don't like how much it goes in and out. Let me think about this. This should be maybe since I'm gonna use on both. Now I rotate or I translate. It doesn't have on the Camera3D. Maybe if I look for the script here. It's probably functions from that they implemented here. It doesn't seem that the camera has anything, true. Oh, it's probably on the Node 3D. So maybe just set position. Let me think about this. Look, which one should I do? I think we're just gonna do position. But I can do the transform as well. So I could, instead of doing like this, I can create another variable. Or instead of creating this variable, I can just get transform and then put transform 3D here. And then just use access the origin of the transform 3D and then just put set transform. Maybe I'll try this first. I'll try this later. Not really sure what's the difference between the two. I think that the transform 3D is just gonna be the matrix that maybe transform is better. Yeah, I think transform is probably better. Because then it holds the information. Like when you change your position, you're changing based on the relative coordinates of the camera. But they both are probably the same, I think. I don't know why it's going to the wrong thing. Should be going here. I'm gonna do transform. It's, it seems that it makes more sense to be a transform. And the problem is that I have to do another one, then change the origin. I'm not really sure if this is the best. Because then, like, it might be the case. Yeah, like I said before, like, I don't like. It's not very intuitive to me the way that they did these things here with the Transform 3D and the bases and stuff like that. It feels very confusing to understand what's going on. So I'm not really sure because like if I do it from the Transform 3D, it might be the case that I lose some information if I change like from the panning, other stuff. So maybe setting the position is better and easier. I think the main difference will be in relationship to other movements, how they're gonna change, how am I going to change the values of the camera 3D or the node 3D, and whether or not it's gonna be easier or harder to keep track of the information the way that it's changing. So the question is, if I do like this, then when I change the value of this, will it change the value of the first one? I'm gonna do the position first. The thing is, I'm not really sure why it's not working here. I wrote the wrong way here. Direction. Yeah, there we go. So move direction is the relative mouse position minus the camera position, which is based on the origin. Then I normalize. Actually, I'm not really sure if I should normalize this or. So maybe I multiply everything by. Yeah. Maybe I don't need to normalize because I do want to get the magnitude. And then just, yeah, but if I shift the whole position, it's not gonna be very good. I do remember that this was kind of annoying the last time that I did. And I think I ended up doing based on a formula because, yeah, the aspect to ratio matters as well, I think. I don't remember, thing is, I forgot which project that I did this. Let's see something. The zoom that they implement is also not the zoom that I want to implement. Because the zoom that I'm thinking to implement, you should zoom based on the mouse, so it's not the same thing. That's the reason why it doesn't have there. So let me think about this. So I think like this vector here is just gonna be the direction, but I don't wanna go all the way to the thing. So I think it makes sense to normalize, and I just multiply by the scale. And maybe I'll multiply everything by the scale. I think this is what, yeah, but this is the problem. I was doing like that on the other one, and I remember that there is an issue. So let me see if I remember the project. So I was on this. There's so much stuff here. Maybe it was this one. I think it was something to do with text. I don't remember if I'm pretty sure that I didn't erase. Maybe it was this. No, I don't think it was this. Oh, I think I did a GitHub repo for this. So based on the GitHub repo name, it's probably gonna be easier to find. So I think it was this simple tax shader. So the thing is, no, I don't think it was here. I don't think it was this one. Let me just download this again. It's easier. Is this repository here, I think. I think that there is a problem if I multiply all of them, all the directions by the scale, because I do remember that it was kind of weird, but maybe it was weird just because of the way that I was projecting the points. So maybe I should test like this first. So you get the relative mouse position, you get the vector basically from the position to the camera, you normalize, and then you just this is 1, and then it's gonna be basically the scale. So we're multiplying everything by scale, so which should move into the direction of the mouse. You change the position of the camera to move closer to the mouse. And the only thing that changes from up and down is the factor. So let me do this first. So let me no, compile. The other ones are also like there's should things, but I'm gonna focus first on the panning. If the zoom is correct like this, I'm gonna focus on the panning next. Because like the problem is how to convert this left here because it's only one event. How do I know? How can I break this down into 3 different functions so I can keep track of the states to see like first you have to press and then you calculate the movement and then you have the up which changes the flag variable that is used to regulate inside of the mouse move whether or not you should translate the camera. So, and the problem is that here they do it differently because they do it based on it's like this, the control flow there is different. Should check to see whether or not it's gonna pan. So that's the problem. I think I can copy the function here, obviously, and just translate the. So I get the transform from the camera and then I translate. Whatever. It should be private. Yeah, this is the issue. So it's not a member. I guess I can just look here. So maybe instead of doing this here, I just I think that here you should probably just change the state. So just set press equals true. Uh, that's for the panning. So, but for the zoom, I should just put like this. Should just create another variable called scale or something like that, and then just make it equal to this stuff here. Or probably put on the class, the scale factor, or scale. And then I call this scale cursor distance based on the other events. The problem is that I don't know the relationship between the two. So it might be annoying to figure this out. So I think mouse motion is probably mouse move. It's probably the same thing. Maybe they have something on the documentation. Yeah, so I think that it is like this. So probably I break down based on the events here. So I think that probably this one is used to check whether or not it's clicked. But that doesn't make any sense, I think. That's the problem. I think that this is the issue because it makes more sense to do the whole thing for the wheel here, but I can only do it based on the other event. But yeah, so I'm gonna search for this one. So I need to clarify which one is which. So I assume that the relative should be on the world coordinates, since you have this other two here. Maybe it's global. Uh, so I guess the way you check is based on the switch. This is for both when it's pressed and on release. But I don't like it doesn't make sense for the wheel to be here, I think. This is what I'm struggling to. So I guess I can just yeah, so I was gonna say that I can put the wheel there, but I'm not really sure if that makes sense. So instead of doing the switch for the mouse wheel up here, I do it here, but I'm not really sure if that's possible. Let me see if there is something for wheel events. So I think that's the main thing. So for the panning, this should make it easier to clarify the stuff that I was talking about. You just put this input event mouse button, and then I have to figure out which switch is responsible for. Yeah, but this is the thing. It might be the same because it's for both release and process. That's the thing that like I need to be able to differentiate the two. So if I can't figure out if there isn't a separation between the switches for when it's up and when it's down, then it's gonna be harder to figure out. Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense for me to be honest. Maybe the mask. Yeah, that makes sense. At global mouse position. Let's see if this works. So this, I assume that this should probably be on the inputs or the events. But this is the issue. Like, these coordinates are not gonna be, I think. No, I guess I can try and see what happens. That's probably the easiest thing to do. Yeah, so I'm gonna do that. Let me see if the event has this value. If the thing goes to the correct place. So let me go to the event again. So I guess the way that you do it is just by flipping a flag variable. But I don't know. It feels off to me, like it feels weird to. I don't understand why they do it like this. I think like what I can do is just put a flag variable inside of the class here, and then I just flip between them. So I check to see if it's rest, and if it isn't, I check to see if the flag variable is true. If it is, I set pressed to false. I basically switch between them so that the first time that it's pressed is gonna be false, then make it true. And then on the other event here, I do it based on that variable. I think that works. And maybe it does make sense to do like this, but it feels kind of weird to me to put the wheel event with this event here. So let me just try with this global mouse position. Third show. I guess I don't need to. Yeah, but it's probably better to do like this, whatever. Because I can use the function here if it's from the canvas item. Hmm. Let me see if it works first. If it works, I'm gonna change there. So for the painting, I'm thinking about doing a flag variable, like I said. Then the other thing would be to rotate based on the mouse middle. So I guess I can do. This is the problem. But for rotation, I think I don't need to. It's just, but I think you do need, because it depends on. It also depends on the mouse position. But if this one works, then I can use the same logic. And then for the middle, based on the movement of the mouse, I can figure out the function to translate the matrix that's responsible for the state of the camera. So figure out how to translate by the angle and just do based on whatever factor I want and the distance. But it's still very confusing. I think this one is based on project settings, maybe. Yeah, I think so. This is the one that I did. The main difference would be the position, the coordinates. That's the main problem. I think that is annoying. So here I converted to MDC based on this thing here, because I'm getting this mouse position would be from, I think this is from Raylib. So Raylib, when you use this, I think it returns on screen coordinates. Then you use this stuff here to convert to NDC, and then you have to unproject to convert to world coordinates. Then I'm getting the direction from the position of the mouse to the position of the camera. I am normalizing here as well. So the new is just the direction. And so I think I didn't do in the correct way here. Hmm. So I can't do like this here. So here I'm normalizing, then I'm setting. There I'm doing the camera position. As the new camera position. So it's direction times the scale factor. I think that part is correct. So camera position plus. So it would be move direction plus equals. And then I set. I think for the zoom is basically the same thing that I'm doing here. So it's depending that I had to put these values here because of the ratio, I think. So this one I wasn't sure if I did it the correct way. But I think it's gonna be easier there if I can get the mouse coordinates from the world coordinates, because then it's just gonna be a flag variable in the beginning and a flag variable at the end, or like the initial position. the new position minus the previous position. That's a delta, and then just move. Just translate the camera based on the delta. And so this is the main questions. How do I get the... I think that I'm struggling to understand is the relationship between... I think like this function is going to be called once each frame. So like if I can put a flag variable, or I can just change the value of this zoom factor here, and then call this later. But I don't know if that makes sense, because then I would be able to call the function from here with the new relative. Or but what I don't understand is like why do things like this, because it would be better to just do it in like in the frame that the event is triggered, wheel up, you move the camera. That makes a lot more sense to me. So I don't like the idea of doing like this. But the problem is if I can't get the mouse position here, I don't think I can, because you need the mouse position to translate based on the mouse position. And here is also not very good because this would be outside there. I guess like if I make a, you know, if I make it like this, and it's still not very good. And this might be very annoying to figure out, because I might have to spend a bunch of time looking into the inputs. But I think I need to spend more time clarifying these different types of inputs here. But I might have to spend a bunch of time on the source code. Like even if this works, it doesn't seem that is right there. Like there should be a way, a better way to do this. So I need to clarify what is the relation, if there is a relationship between. So the way that I'm thinking about now is that this is equivalent of both up and down, and this is equivalent of mouse move, and these would be the main ones they use. And on this one, for whatever reason, they also put the wheel. The problem is that they run on different frames. because this is only gonna run once, I think. Maybe it runs as many times as different event. Yeah, but that wouldn't make sense, I think. Oh, there's a. I think that the error is from the GD script here. Yeah, so it's not working. French is almost not working. Hmm. Even if it does work, like I said, it's not the best. So I can try to set the transform here, but I think I'm gonna stop streaming here. I'm just gonna spend some time watching or reading this stuff here, the documentation. This is very annoying, not gonna lie. Because it feels harder than it's supposed to be honest. And I didn't like these parts from Godot since the beginning, like the way that they do the matrices transformation. It's kind of confusing to me to understand. But this is something that it was annoying to do even before as well, because it's just like these details are kind of annoying to figure out. So like the main thing that I wanna clarify is the how to get the mouse position and in what kind of coordinates they are. I think that's the main thing, and then clarify the relation between the inputs. But the thing that is frustrating is that I might have to spend a bunch of time in the source code trying to clarify, because then I might have to go over with the debugger and then spend a bunch of time like looking at the cycle to figure out how the window events connect to the thing. Implementing the panning might be easier than implementing the zoom, but it's still like I don't like it very much. I guess it's not that big of a deal, the panning. Just can put up flag bar one and switch. The wheel is the one that I think is kind of weird. It might be annoying to translate though, because it might be confusing, the classes there. I'm not sure if that's... It's better to just do prost. The thing is that they use this prost here, so maybe I should use this prost here. Wait, maybe I can use this. Hmm. So let me try this. So hopefully this works. I think if this works, I'm gonna try to finish. Is that if I can separate the panning from the zooming, then I can put the condition inside of the other one there to based on the flag variable. I actually have to a bit. I think probably get relative should give me already the delta, I think. But I'm not really sure. But if it does give me the delta, then I can just translate the camera by the delta. If the variable is true there, I think that should allow me to implement the panning. I think it might be like if it doesn't work, it might be because I didn't change the value in the correct way, or like there's something that I'm doing with the function there inside of the function. It doesn't work. Hmm. But the thing is, like, even if the calculations were off, you should still like do something. Unless the function doesn't make sense, sure. Like unless it doesn't make sense to call set position here. So I guess I can try to change the transform. Or it might be because of this thing. Yeah, I think I'm gonna stop here. I'm just gonna read the documentation to clarify the events here. I'm gonna, because I think I'm not gonna do it like this. So I can translate the functions from this project here. So I think for the delta, I can just use get relative position. So it should be, if it isn't, then obviously I can just put a variable there. So like inside of the condition for the left, when I make this, I can keep like inside of the class, I can create another memory variable and then update the value based on the position of the mouse here. And then I just do it so I do previous and after one. And then I just do one minus the other, which is basically what I'm doing here. So one minus the other gives you the delta, how much the mouse is moving. And then you just translate the camera based on this delta. But this is going to depend on whether or not the mouse position is on the correct like coordinates, on the same coordinates as the camera, like the magnitude. And yeah, for this I'm not really sure. Like it could be, like, since it's compiling and working, it could be because of the way that I'm changing here, but it should change the position of the camera. That's the thing. Because this, I'm 100% sure that this works on the other classes because I already used this. So this should be changing the position of the camera. So the only reason could be, or the reason could be because of this relative position here, but I think you should be at least changing the z direction. That's the thing. So maybe there is something else here. It could be so I'm gonna delete this and then test, just say. But I don't think that this is the problem. I'm gonna write this one. But I think the issue this one's gonna be it's gonna be the coordinates. So here is the transform. Let me try this as well. So yeah, but the thing is, I'm not really sure because I already have the transform there. So last thing that I'm gonna try. Yeah, didn't work. But yeah, I assumed that it wasn't gonna work. So it's probably something else. So I'm just gonna stop here. I'm gonna spend a bunch of time reading the documentation. It is very annoying, not gonna lie. So I'm gonna clarify this, and then I'm gonna see if after I clarify, I'm gonna try to figure out what is wrong here with this function. So the main thing to clarify is the relationship between these events. Uh, how these events are related to the events in the browser. So like what are the equivalents, and then what is the correct way to translate the camera uh, from this class here. So change the position, and maybe it's better to like just try to. I think that's what I'm gonna do next time. So Next thing I'm gonna test is inside of this function, I'm just gonna change I'm gonna try to change the position of the camera by a random value. And then once that works, then I go back to trying to do the formula here. So yeah, translating and then also figuring out clarifying whether or not the values you get here are for the world coordinates values or their screen coordinates. Like, yeah, basically what these values return. So next time, if I solve this, I'm gonna explain how I did. And if I didn't, then I'm gonna be trying to figure out still. So